You are now about to hear
You don't understand.
On the Block with Bryce.
I ain't scared of you, motherfucker.
I just want to start the show by saying this. You don't have to agree with everything I say. In fact, I encourage you not to agree with everything I say. Just so long as you remain curious and skeptical. That's all I really need from you. So hopefully you're doing that when you listen to the show. Welcome to On the Block with Bryce. Thank you for hitting up the block. I'm your host, Bryce Castle. The next thing I'm going to tell you, unfortunately, we're not doing a full show this time. I'm very much under the weather. You probably hear it in my voice. I record the intros to the show always after I record the segments I'm doing because sometimes I change things up and I never know what's going to be featured. And then I do the intro to tell you what's going to be featured once I have it set in stone. So the feature that we are doing, that we have prepared today, threw my voice out. As you can tell, not doing well. Start strong in the segment and end terribly. So yeah, the Bill of Rights series will continue next time. Got a couple more announcements to make at the tail end of the show that you'll hear at the end of it. For now, we got the one topic that I promised you on Facebook that we were going to talk about. The hell's going on in our government? What happened at the Capitol? I have a lot of thoughts on it, and I'm going to give them to you in just a minute. Don't go anywhere. I really want you to hear this. This is On the Block with Bryce. Hey everyone, it's Bryce. You know, with everything going on in our country today, it can sometimes feel impossible to escape the political sphere that seems to have overtaken everything in our lives. Nowadays, one can't even buy a pack of diapers or watch a movie, it seems, without it somehow being connected to what it might say about you and your politics. It probably comes as no surprise when I tell you that this is not a way to live. It is so important to unplug from all of this insanity on a regular basis, even for just a short while. Now, try as I might to remove politics from this podcast, it's impossible right now. While it is important to take a break from things, it's also important to call out the nonsense when you see it and to keep people as informed as possible. That's why Jerkcat Entertainment is proud to offer alternative forms of media not tied to the political machine to help you find a necessary break from all the bullshit. If we're going to take this culture back and make it apolitical again, it needs to start by doing things that are actually apolitical. Talking about it isn't enough, and actually, it's counterproductive. So if you want to check out something without worrying about what it might say about you or your politics, check out my band Joyride Aviator on YouTube. We play guitar-heavy, metal-inspired pop-punk music who sing about interpersonal relationships, introspection, and dealing with the hardships of life while in your 30s. If that's not really your thing, then you might like our channel Board Games and Brews a little better. In that series, we take a look at modern board games and pair them up with delicious beverages from around the world. They're both amazing hobbies to get into, and when combining them, it creates a genuinely fun experience meant to bring people together to interact, compete, and have fun. As Jerkcat grows, we're hoping to become a larger force in the apolitical culture within America. We're talking music, talk shows, hobbies, comedy, sports, outdoors, and anything else we can manage. Other more established content creators are already on board with this idea, and that's a great thing. We don't mind competition, and in fact, we encourage it. There needs to be as many people doing this as willing. So check out Jerkcat Entertainment for a much-needed break away from the political sphere. We look forward to being part of your effort to take the culture back simply by being an active member within it. And now back to the show. Okay, so I want to start off this segment with an apology in advance because I am not the most articulate person in the world. It's very difficult for me to take all that's rumbling around in my head and spit it out in a coherent way that's easy to follow. So bear with me. I have a lot to say about this. I think it's important, not to pat myself on the back, but it's just because I haven't heard anyone else talk about it this way before, and I want to give this to you so you can gain some perspective and draw your own conclusions. But again, I'm not very articulate, so I apologize. Wish me luck. Here we go. So, my thoughts about what happened January 6th at the Capitol. I waited a few weeks to give these to you, and I did this for two reasons. Number one, anyone can just react to something. It's very easy to see it and react. I don't like to just react. I think reactions are stupid. I think they're useless. I think they get you nowhere. To see something and just react is very counterproductive to me. That's number one. Number two, I saw something very different at the Capitol. I saw something very, very extreme. I saw something more than just a failed security effort. I saw more than just a couple of people acting a fool. I saw something more than a couple of people dying. I think if it was just that, we could all look at it, shake our heads, regard it as a one-off, isolated incident, and move on from it. And I think that's what a lot of people are doing. I think that's what some people want you to do. But I saw something else entirely. What I saw was a catalyst. What I saw was a much anticipated, wanted even, situation which paved the way for a few people to really do some damage in this country. I think we've been seeing this for the last 4 years, specifically the last 4 years, although it might have gone back a little further. But I think, honestly, I think what we saw is the last paragraph in the prologue that is the story of America's future. I think the last 4 years we've been watching in real time the creation, organization, and ascension of a neo-fascist, kleptocratic government bent on securing permanent control and using the presidential election along with the riot at the Capitol as the proverbial final straws in order to ensure their confidence in having absolute success at this goal. So let's define some terms. Kleptocracy, kleptocratic government. What is that? Well, in short, a kleptocracy is a form of government whose leaders are very corrupt, and they use their political power to appropriate the wealth of their nation, put money from the nation into their pocket, typically at the expense of its citizenry. A good example of this is the COVID bill from earlier last year, $2 trillion, which was enough to give every American adult more than $8,000 apiece, and yet they only saw $1,200. The rest of that money went to various groups, organizations, centers, and accounts that many elected officials had an interest in, including $20 million, which got split up amongst members of the House. They gave themselves a raise. Now, keep in mind, elected officials at the federal level earn a minimum of $174,000 a year. That's more than $100,000 higher than your average annual income in America. So that's a very good example of what a kleptocracy is. Now, neo-fascism. This can mean a lot of different things. Neo, of course, means new. Fascism, and I'm surprised we haven't covered this before because people have been throwing out the word fascism forever lately, and nobody really has it right. So what is fascism? Well, fascism is an authoritarian single-party government that enforces a lot of things, usually with help of the private sector to some degree or another, and they enforce things like ethnic nationalism, which is far different from just normal nationalism. That's okay to have. Ethnic nationalism, very, very bad, but they use ethnic nationalism. They have a rigid class system. They believe in a rigid societal class system in which rich people get to remain rich and poor people have to stay poor. They believe in a regimentation of societal practices. So the state has an idea of how people in their nation should behave, and they expect people to behave in that way. Fascism practices dirigisme economics, and what dirigisme means is that private industries are allowed to stay private so long as they work on behalf of the state. So it's basically like the merging of private corporations and the oppressive state. Last but not least, fascism believes in the suppression or eradication of opposition, often using and condoning violence to do so. So they're very big fans of political violence in order to get their message across and make it the only message in town. Now think about what we've seen these last 4 years. The Democratic Party and mainstream media outlets have indeed worked in tandem to push forward a message about this president that they want the world to believe. We've seen these messages embolden the radical left in this country, who have used violence time and time again to promote their ideologies in the name of stopping this false sense of racism and fascism in our president and his voter base. But they've also become very emboldened in the cultural structure of America as well. We're talking about radical leftist beliefs such as the idea that a man can be a woman. We're talking about the idea of rewriting history in order to fit a narrative of systemic racism that isn't actually there. We're talking about the ideas of white privilege and white guilt, victim status based on skin color, which allows the left to put people in this hierarchy of who is most important and who should be most heard. We're talking about a left that believes in doxing people, the practice of putting their address and name out there if they've done something they don't like, hoping that somebody will go to their house and do something about it. They support the idea that pedophilia can be a sexual orientation. They demonize people who have wealth They're anarchistic, they're Marxist, they hate the idea of the nuclear family, they practice in screaming at people until they get their way. And this new one, my favorite thing that they believe lately is any black or brown person who doesn't support these radical ideologies or who just has a mind of their own is actually practicing something called multiracial white supremacy. And all these things, as radical as they are, have been adopted by Democrats who put it forth in their policies going forward. This, of course, creates more division within the country because people who don't agree with these ideologies are now seeing lawmakers put these insane ideals into their laws. And so people do what they naturally do when they see something they don't like. They say something about it. They say it on social media. They express their dissatisfaction of all these wild leftist ideologies. And what do the leftists do? Well, because they redefine what racism means, they just call him a racist, and they group him in together with Trump, who they believe is a racist. And then the media reports on that. The Democrats adopt that policy. The media reports on that again, and around we go. So now the left is calling for social media companies to silence these people who have different points of view than them. They say that they're practicing hate speech and that they're being racist and that it's dangerous. And the Democrats adopt that, and then the media pushes for it. So now these social media platforms are in a real mess now, aren't they? Because the Democrats threaten to take their businesses away. They say, well, gee, it's a real shame if somebody accused you of being a monopoly. This, of course, is just something I believe has happened based on what we've seen. There hasn't been a hearing or anything done like that or any hearing worth talking about. There's been a couple of Republicans who hold hearings, but we're going to get to the Republicans in a second. But the Democrats have called on social media companies. They echo the voice of their radical leftist base. They call on these social media companies to do something about all this wild racist rhetoric out there. And social media companies are terrified, or I think that's at least how it started. They started out as terrified that these Democratic politicians were going to come in and trust bust them to death and break them up and take over the internet and take over their business. After all, a lot of these people in the Democratic Party are socialists, after all. They believe in grabbing private corporations and dissolving them into state-run entities. And so they play ball. They know the Republicans won't do anything, so they play ball. And I think that's what happened. And so you started seeing a lot of people with conservative viewpoints get banned and blocked, and things they were posting were getting flagged as false information, and stories that were being posted that the Democrats didn't like were being swept away, like the Joe Biden story of his son with the laptop and ties to China and all that, swept away. In fact, if you posted about it right before the election took place, you could be banned from Facebook or Twitter. I mean, that shit's insane. But as insane as it sounds, it's exactly what I've been describing to you. It's this merging of corporate America and government in order to push forth a narrative, in order to set forth a societal structure in which everyone has to abide by. Believe these things or you get shut down. Believe these things or we will call you bad names. Believe these things or we will hurt you. And let's talk about the hurt. When these radical leftists hear on the news that there are racists among them, and it's pushed forward by the media, and it's pushed forward by the Democratic Party who encourage them to believe those things, they react. Remember, they believe in punching Nazis. So what have they done? They've gotten very, very violent. How many videos have you seen last year of these leftist Antifa and Black Lives Matter mobs hurting people for not repeating Black Lives Matter, hurting people for owning businesses, throwing bricks and shooting people for wearing Trump hats? It happened all last year, and the Democrats and the media looked the other way or covered it up and then repeated the message again. So when I am speaking of fascism, we're starting to see a lot of similarities here working on different levels. Let's talk about the violence a little more, because last year there was a lot of it. Democratic leaders across the country, as well as the mainstream media, looked the other way while these emboldened BLM and Antifa groups rioted all over the country in the name of racial justice, in the name of falsified beliefs in a systemically racist system that did not exist. And exactly why was BLM and Antifa so successful in being able to destroy so many businesses across so many neighborhoods in this country? It's because all these businesses have been shut down indefinitely thanks to the horrific response by the same elected officials who looked the other way while Antifa was rioting. The lockdowns have been a tremendous failure. And it doesn't matter what results you show them. It doesn't matter what stories you tell out of Florida or other countries across the world who didn't lock down and found relative success in combating this virus. They kept you locked down anyway. And when they keep you locked down anyway, and they allow people who they feel support them to run around roughshod and destroy your entire city, you have to suspect there's something deeper going on there. And I think I know what it is. And this is where corporate America comes into play. You see, corporate America, the big multi-billion-dollar conglomerates, they've been buddy-buddy with Democratic leaders since the mid-1980s. You see, this is why it pays to know your history. In 1984, the presidential election of 84, Ronald Reagan completely bitch-slapped Walter Mondale. Walter Mondale won one state. He won one state. Reagan won the other 49. The Democratic Party was finished. Now, I personally didn't like Reagan as a president, but that's not the point. The point was they thought they were finished. They were losing every voter base they thought they had. The black voter base, Latinos, everyone. They thought they were all gone. So what did they do? They aligned themselves with a different set of support. They aligned themselves with rich elitists who had enough money to feel bad about the ills of the world. And then they told them that with their help, they could make all the ills right. And since 1984, the big multi-billion-dollar side of corporate America has been buddy-buddy with the Democratic Party. And in doing so, they've been able to do a lot of tricky things. For example, the Democratic Party believe in raising taxes on the 1%. You hear the 1% a lot. The 1% in America is anyone who earns $350,000 or more. Not $350 million. You heard right, $350,000. Now, if you are a small business owner, you're definitely making more than $350,000, but you're not making anywhere near $350 million. All of a sudden, you get a tax hike. Well, now you can't afford to keep your employees, or at least not all of them. On top of that, minimum wage gets raised again. Now you really can't afford anyone. Now you're stuck. Now you might go under. Well, you go under, and what does that do for the big multi-million and multi-billion-dollar corporations? Well, it eliminates smaller competition. Now let's take a look at these lockdowns again. All the smaller competitors, the competitors from Amazon, competitors of Google, competitors of Microsoft, they have to shut down. They can't afford to stay open, mostly because the government won't let them, but they can't afford to survive this because, like most people in America, small businesses are month to month. So they shut down and all the competition goes away. And corporate America, the multi-million-dollar companies, they survive it all. And they support the BLM rioters of all things. They do. Nike supported it. All sorts of companies came out in support. Black Lives Matter was supported by Starbucks. Funny how all the multi-billion-dollar companies were in support of these riots because they can survive the riot. If one of their stores gets smashed up, they can survive it. But the small business can't, especially if they've been locked down for months. Locked down by Democrats who look the other way. Locked down by Democrats who then can convince the media to call the riots mostly peaceful, who then echo that message, and then it gets out there on social media, and if you say anything about it, they can silence you if you say anything other than it was a peaceful protest. So are you beginning to see it now? Are you beginning to see how one faction on the left will do something that helps another, which in turn helps the other? Can you see how they're all kind of working in a synergistic way to create this powerful entity of corporation and state and radical movement on the ground? Do you see what I'm saying now? I certainly hope you do, because I'm about to explain to you how this synergistic energy has given the United States government a really powerful and frightening tool against you. You see, federal, state, local governments, they have rules they have to abide by. You have rights in this country that they cannot interfere with. It's absolutely illegal for them to interfere with your rights. However, private companies are not held under such obligations, meaning that a social media company, for example, can kick you out anytime they want for whatever reason they want. But we're talking about that synergistic energy again. So let me paint you a picture. You say something a Democratic senator doesn't like. Somebody like AOC, for example. And she puts pressure on social media companies. The media helps her. Other Democrats help her. The leftist mob helps her. And they put pressure on social media companies to maybe pay more attention to this violent misinformation or whatever else they call you, this racist information or whatever else they call your opinion. And eventually the social media company, who doesn't have the obligation to allow you to speak freely on their platform, they shut you down. This has been happening all over the place. Conservative voices, people who don't agree with the leftist mob, people who speak out against the corruption in the mainstream media, they're getting shut down. They're getting kicked off of Twitter and Facebook and YouTube. Now, here's something to understand about these platforms. They are massively powerful, and they're massively powerful because they have become the place in the 21st century where people can come together and speak their minds freely. However, they're under no obligation to acknowledge your constitutionally protected rights. And the government, while they have to, if they're working in tandem with other factions who don't have to follow the Constitution in regards to your rights, the government can simply just nudge private companies to violate your rights for them. This is a very scary hybrid, but it is very, very real. And the fun doesn't stop there. Private enterprise, right? Private sector, if you don't like the fact that we kick you off of our social media platforms, you can create your own social media platform. And you know what? I'm a free market guy. I agree with that. And so do a lot of others. And that's exactly what they did. Competing social media platforms were on the rise last year. Gab, Parler, Rumble, among others. Parler being the biggest one. Now, Parler was essentially the alternative to Twitter. It's where a lot of conservative voices ended up jumping ship and going to. And it did become quite an echo chamber, but that wasn't the purpose of Parler. They just wanted to be a place where anyone could go and speak freely because you weren't able to on YouTube or Twitter or Facebook. And they were gaining a lot of traction. They were gaining a lot of followers. They were gaining a lot of subscribers. People were hopping on board to Parler, left, right, and center. This not only meant competition as far as just users go when it comes to Twitter and Facebook, but it also meant a competition of ideas. Now, if you are synergistically working together in tandem with the leftist mob and Democratic base and the media and all that, who are designing a system in which only they get to tell you what's true and only they get to tell you what is and what isn't. Competition is a very scary thing. Well, this is where private enterprise saves the day again for them. Amazon Web Service, they own almost every server out there that makes up the internet. And what did Amazon do? They shut Parler down. They canceled their site. What was the reason for it? Well, they said it was because the people who stormed the Capitol had planned this insurrection. And yes, it was planned. They said they had planned it on Parler. Now, this, of course, isn't true. As it turns out, it was planned on Facebook. But it didn't matter. When everybody's working in tandem, the way Democrats and media and social media and the leftist mobs are, you can say whatever you want. And as long as you're the only one spitting out information, it doesn't matter what's true or not. You see, this is, again, what I'm talking about. The merger of corporation interests and political interests together to create this fascistic form of government. Now let's talk about that election. I don't really have much to say on it as far as was it rigged, was it not rigged? We could get into it all day. I do think personally that some funny business happened, but I can't prove anything. So all I can say is two things. Number one, everyone felt the DNC cheated Bernie Sanders out of the top spot in 2016. If that's true, there's no reason to believe that precedents will be broken in 2020, especially against a man who rocked the boat of the establishment. And number two, regardless of how you feel, Joe back-in-chains Biden and Kamala Harris, America's Agrippina the Younger, are president and vice president of the United States, and with them comes the rest of the Democratic machine and the mainstream media who are absolutely on their knees deep-throating this administration. A cabinet whose members once held high seats in companies like Facebook and Google, who not only profited highly off of this pandemic and lockdown, but also was able to work in tandem with the Democratic side of our government in order to shut down people whom they did not like and no longer wanted to hear from. And even just a few days in, this Biden administration is already putting forth laws and mandates that remind us again of the fascist government I described to you at the top of this segment. Now, why do I call it neo-fascism? The reason is because this government that we're seeing, this synergistic merging of corporate and state, it doesn't really follow the same traits as traditional fascism. There is no ethnic nationalism. In fact, it's quite the opposite. What the government's doing right now is practicing very divisive tactics in order to keep people divided. This is a socialistic tactic, so this is more like socialism. So that's why it's not traditionally fascism in that way. You're not really seeing rigid class structures so much, class based on how much money you have versus the next guy, but you are seeing very rigid racial structures. Depending on what race you are, depending on how victimized you're perceived to be, will depend on where you are on the totem pole. So it's not traditionally fascist in terms of class. However, there is a hierarchy here. And while there is a clear synergistic tandemment of corporation and state working together for their interest, there also is a big desire by the state to socialistically spread bailout money across the land. Again, this is a socialistic practice. So this is why I can't call it traditional fascism. This is why neo-fascism works better. You are seeing a merger of state and corporate interest. You are seeing violence being condoned or at least looked the other way at. While those interests get perpetuated forward within the culture, you do see certain structures of class or race in this case, but it's not traditional fascism. It's neo-fascism, and I'm pretty sure by now you can see where the kleptocracy comes in, because all these actors are benefiting greatly from this merger, especially the old political machine that has been chugging on and on for a very long time. And they have zero plans of ever giving an opportunity to anyone else again. The proof is in this. Trump is being impeached even though he's out of office. They are trying to make sure he never runs again. Further than that, they're going after all of his supporters. People are talking about blacklisting anyone who worked for the Trump administration. Some are even going further, saying anyone who voted for Trump, we need to have their information. We need to know who they're or what they're about. We need to know who they associate with. Some are saying that Republican senators all over the place should resign for supporting Trump. They're really going after everyone. They are really trying to say, we don't ever want to give you power again. You will always be under our control, and we are going to take vengeance on anyone who dared question and challenge us. That is what I believe we are seeing. And if they're able to continue to control what information you see, if they're able to continue to pass laws that support these wild leftist conspiracy beliefs, they will be able to do this little by little, one person at a time. They may not come after you first, but eventually you will be on the chopping block. Now, I said we're going to talk about Republicans later. Let's talk about Republicans real quick. Do you think that these establishment Republicans are against any of this? This is all part of the game. You have to understand something about this whole Democrat-Republican dichotomy here. It's really not that much of a dichotomy. This is all political theater. It's been political theater for the longest time. Let me lay this out for you. Tell me if this sounds familiar. Republicans are in charge. Democrats complain about them. Then they become in charge. They make a bunch of changes. Republicans complain about the changes. And then they become in charge and don't do anything. The Democrats complain that the Republicans didn't do anything, and they come into power again, and so on and so on. This is the game. This is the elitist establishment game that these motherfuckers have played for years on the political stage, and the media has helped them run with it, and everyone just kind of accepted it because every now and then the guy they liked got through, but nothing ever got done except for further and further pushes towards what we call the leftist agenda, but really, now that we can see it in this light, it's the establishment takeover, the permanent establishment takeover. The reason Republicans have always sat back and done nothing is because they benefit from all the radical democratic policies. They have stake in all the major companies who benefit from people losing their businesses. So what the fuck do they care if there's a tax hike or a minimum wage increase? It doesn't affect their business. It doesn't affect their stakes. They have stakes in all the big companies. They like when these businesses go under. This is the game that the right and left have always played. So the Republicans will always do nothing except try to convince you that they are for the working man. They are not. They haven't been for a very, very long time. So as far as Republicans go, get the fuck out of here. They're not your solution to this particular problem. Why do you think so many of these establishment Republicans, your Mitch McConnells, Lindsey Grahams, and all that, why do you think they're going after Trump? Why do you think they're allowing this ridiculous Trump impeachment to persist? How can you impeach a guy who's not in office? Read the Constitution. There's nothing there that says you can do it. This is simply a power grab by the establishment. Do you think Republicans want another Donald Trump? They don't want another Donald Trump. It shows so much light on how useless they've been, on how much they just sit there and collect their check while everyone else suffers. They don't want that again. They want to play the political game. They want to collect their check and pretend that they care and then lose power and go, oh, not my fault. We got outvoted by all these Democrats. It's the Democrats. It's you too, you motherfucker. They don't want another Trump. They don't want another outsider. They don't want people who believe that the system is corrupt because they're right. It definitely is. They don't want that. So they're going to placate this crap. And you're going to see them placate a whole lot more in the years to come. Believe you me. And listen, before we close off, I just want to say that even though all of this is a well-oiled machine now, I don't think it always started that way. I'm not big into conspiratorial beliefs. I'm not a big conspiracy guy. We got enough conspiracies out there with crazy QAnon people and the wild radical leftists and all their conspiracies. I don't think that this was done purposely. What I think happened is in 2016, everyone started working in their own best interest, and it just so happened to be that all their interests kind of, coincided together, that they all combined, and now they have a well-oiled machine, but I don't think that was the plan starting out. It's very hard for me to believe that all these people were sitting in a high tower, drinking brandy, twirling their mustaches, going, yes, and in 5 years we will have them storm the Capitol and it will be glorious. Unless you got some evidence to show me that, I have a hard time believing that people can do anything conspiratorially, because most people are very, very stupid, especially people in political office, especially these people in the media, especially these people in social media, especially the leftist mobs. They're all a bunch of fucking morons. I don't see it happening. We have a lot of accidents, a lot of happy accidents, fortunate accidents for the people now in charge. That is it. And I think it's important to make that distinction, because when you think conspiracy, a lot of people start to believe that it's so big that nothing can be done about it, and you just have to hold on and enjoy the ride, or endure the ride in this case. And I don't want to put that out there. I don't want that perception out there. These are not evil geniuses. These are stupid people who just so happen to be in the right place at the right time for their agenda to push through. Remember the Democratic slogan, every crisis is an opportunity. So when leftist mobs start dictating to companies and social media what they want them to do, bam, that's an opportunity. When the media notices Trump being called racist by the DNC, bam, that's an opportunity. COVID-19 hits and people are scared to come outside, bam, that's an opportunity. And so on and so forth. So as much as it is something to be worried about, we shouldn't be worrying about it in the sense of David versus Goliath. These people are not Goliath. They only seem that way. So what's the answer here? You know me. I'm not a guy who just gives you a list of problems. I'd like to share with you my opinion of what the answer is too. Well, I think the first part of the solution is pinpointing the problem. And if you agree with anything I've said today, then the problem is abundantly clear and obvious. And, well, congratulations, the easy part is over. As far as the rest of it, I think we all need to familiarize ourselves with what exactly this country was supposed to be. This is why I'm doing the Bill of Rights series. This is why I think that's so important. Most people don't know what their rights are. They don't know anything about the Constitution. They don't know anything about any of this stuff. They just kind of go about their day-to-day because they have their kids and their jobs and their mortgages and their pets and their bills and the things they like to do and the people they like to see. And a part of that is really wonderful, because that's what America was always supposed to be, this free nation where free peoples can roam freely without worry of their government. But on the other hand, the ugly side of that is it's being taken over, or taken advantage of, I should say, entirely by these kleptocratic Neo-Fascists. So we have to pay attention a little. Everyone's got to start doing something. The time for doing nothing is over, because we're going to lose what we have here if we're not careful. Now, I don't think we're to extreme degrees yet where, a true fight, is necessary, believe me, you'll know when we're there. When they start coming to your house and removing your kids from your house or, sending you off to here and there, let me just put it to you this way. We have a Second Amendment for a reason, and then it will be time for it. But we're not there yet. And I don't think they want to get there yet either. I don't think they want to get there at all. I think a ignorant, happy populace is a lot easier to control than a pissed off one, which is why they're trying to, cram only certain information our way, I think. I think it starts with education. Educate yourself on the Constitution. Educate yourself on the Bill of Rights. Know those documents. Know what your rights are. Know that there are things in this country we can do that don't require revolution to make changes. Revolution only begins more problems because the people who take place in the revolution never know what to do next. Ever. History's been very, very clear on that. Nobody knows what to do after a revolution. Our founding fathers figured that out, and they wrote provisions in our Constitution that disallow the need for revolution ever again. But we have to know what they are first. And it's also important to know these things so you know what exactly is being taken from you. How do you know anyone's taking anything from you if you didn't even know you had it? But also beyond that, you got to get involved in your local government a little more. We're never going to change this from the top down. It has to start from the bottom up. Get to know your mayor. Get to know your assemblyman. Get to know your city councilman. Run for a spot if you can. Fix the potholes. Time the streetlights. Fix the little things first, and then grow from there. Bring back public servitude to the elected office. These people are not meant to be our bosses or our gods or our betters. They're meant to be our servants. Bring that back. But beyond that, bring the culture back. It doesn't mean stand up against the leftist mob with conservative rhetoric. No. It doesn't mean that at all. But what it does mean is being, we're not about that. Bro, all that stuff you're spouting off, we're not about that. From the left or the right. Because you got to remember, the right had their extremists too. You remember the 90s when they were talking about, God doesn't want you listening to rap music and all that stupid shit? You got to cancel all the extremism out. You got to be like, nah, bro, we're not feeling that. We're doing the American way. We're going to live how we want to live, and you can live how you want to live, and we're going to live in peace. You got to bring that back to the culture. The live and let live mentality has to come back to the culture if you want to change things. Aside from that, there's not much most people are going to be able to do. But it does start with us, each and every one of us. It does start with us. We can make changes in our own lives, and that will balloon out. So keep informed, keep educated. As far as keeping informed goes, assume the news is lying to you, because they are. Every news channel you watch, they're lying to you. Where to go for news? Unfortunately, you can't come here. I can't give you the news every day. It takes too much. I have a full-time job. It's just too much to do, If I got paid doing this, that'd be one thing. But as of right now, I don't yet. Maybe one day. Until then, I can suggest podcasts like Tim Pool. I think Tim Pool's a pretty straight shooter. I think if you can get past the conservative opinions, if you can kind of filter that out, I think Ben Shapiro gives the news to you pretty straight. If, again, you can filter out the conservative opinions. You'll find sources. Just stay away from the mainstream media. Get off of social media. I think that's another thing that people can do. And there's a lot people can do. Actually. I can ramble on and on about what the solution might be. You got to find the solution for yourself. But I think it does start with being educated and bringing that live and let live mentality back and getting involved in local politics a little more to some degree. Even if you just, pay attention to what's going on, that's still better than you were doing. So that's what I can suggest. And we got to do something, because these cats are making moves and they're not going to stop. These people are tyrannical. They would be this way in elected office or whether they ran McDonald's. So, keep that in mind about these folks. Maybe the next major election, just vote them all out. We could all do that. Vote them out, assuming they allow us to vote some more, which they should. They're not going to do this all at once. It's going to be a slow, gradual thing, so make sure that we work slowly and gradually into making sure they don't. You want outsiders running for office. You do. You really do. You may not have liked Trump or his rhetoric, and maybe he was the wrong man for the job in terms of making lasting changes go, but you want outsiders. Trust me. Maybe keep looking for those outsiders. Maybe it's you. I don't know. Anyway, that's going to do it for the show of the day. I'm a little under the weather, as I said in the beginning of the show, not feeling great. We will continue our Bill of Rights series next time. I am going to slow the show down a bit. I've been really killing myself to make sure that I get an episode out every other week, like on time, like every Monday. I was going to switch it to every Wednesday. That was supposed to help, but like there's just so much going on. I got the board game channel, I got this, I got music, I got my day job. You know, I'm a husband to a wonderful wife. I would like to see her a little more, you know. All of this stuff I do is important to me, but you know, being a good husband and enjoying life and living my life is also important. So the show is going to be a little more spread out in the future. I'm still going to give you a quality show. You're just not going to get it as often. I'm going to work on it to the best of my ability. When I have free time, I'm going to make time for other things, and then you know, you'll get the show when you get the show, but I promise you it'll be good. The Bill of Rights series is going to continue. The show is going to continue. Yeah, just a little sick right now, so I couldn't do anything else other than this segment. Not feeling well. We thought we had COVID. We did. We thought we had COVID, but it turns out we don't. I'm just a little under the weather. So anyway, thanks for listening. I hope you got something out of this. I look forward to hearing any comments you want to make about it, about the idea. Maybe you thought I presented it bad. I don't know. Whatever you want to say. I look forward to hearing it. If you think there's somebody who can benefit from this, please share it. 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts is the best way to help the show. Get it out there. Parler is gone, but we're still on Rumble. If you want to support Rumble, if you don't like YouTube censoring people and stuff, we're on Rumble. Jerkcat's on Rumble. You can catch everything of Jerkcat on Rumble. And yeah, that's it. Keep your eyes open. Keep your ears open. Stay curious. Stay sharp. Stay informed. Stay educated. We'll catch you on the block next time. Thanks for tuning in.